sutras. So you have some long lists in front of you. I put those in front of you simply so that you can investigate those texts if you want to. I am not going to read all these sutras to you. That would take the rest of your life. But Soto Shu identifies 4 important texts, which it's good to know what they would centralize. Some of them you may not be familiar with. I'm going to pull up my copy of the handout, so I'm looking at what you're looking at. So, meaning of practice and verification of the Shushogi, Heart Sutra or Hanya Shingyo, Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva Universal Gateway chapter, sometimes just called Universal Gateway of the Lotus Sutra, and the Lifespan chapter, also of the Lotus Sutra. So these 4 things, Soto Shu itself would say, are central texts. These are not texts that we typically study, like Genzo-e, right, or like Dharma study. These are texts we chant. So other than the Heart Sutra, we don't chant those texts here. We certainly chant them in Japan. So the 2 from the Lotus Sutra are part of the regular standard morning service. We chant those things every day. Shushogi I only ever chanted for funerals. That's not why it was written. In a minute I'll say some things about Shushogi, right? That's not a well-known text in North America. So don't look at those 4 texts and think, oh my gosh, somehow I missed the boat and I've never done Dharma study on those texts. You probably won't, other than possibly Heart Sutra. Right? These are things we chant. So Hanya Shingyo or Heart Sutra, you are probably familiar with. It's the distillation of a 600-volume Great Wisdom or Prajnaparamita Sutra. It's distilled all of those 600 volumes down to just 262 kanji. So you could spend your life studying the Heart Sutra and sort of unpacking all of that. Heart Sutra is pretty much chanted everywhere by everyone. You might do it in the original Hanya Shingyo Japanese. You might do it in your native language, English or wherever you are. It's one of the first things I think that gets translated and probably memorized. So the theme of this Hanya Shingyo is emptiness, which is what? We've talked about emptiness several times. Somebody tell us what emptiness is, here or at home. At home, if it's you, just open your mic. Emptiness. What is emptiness? Really?
Nothing fixed.
Nothing exists. No.
Nothing fixed.
Nothing fixed. Thank you. Yes, nothing exists was the early mistake, right? So nothing has a fixed and permanent self-nature that persists through time. There's nothing we can grasp. Shunyata. Yeah. So thank you, Stefan. You are absolutely right. Emptiness is critical for us, so we need to know what that is. So Hanya Shingyo is really pointing us to emptiness, because if you know anything about that text, it says things like no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no sight, no sound, no smell, right? It just negates. All the sense gates, the Eightfold Path, everything Buddha says, it goes and negates it. And you just think, what's going on? And of course, what it's saying is don't cling to any of that stuff. Right? So, Heart Sutra. I want to say a couple things about the Shushogi. Folks don't often know what that is, the meaning of practice and verification. So it is really a series of extracts from the Shobo Genzo. It was compiled during the Meiji period, so it's relatively recent. This is not an ancient Chinese text or something like that. It was compiled in Japan. It played a major role in popularizing the teachings among lay people. So this was a text that was really created in order to bring it to lay people and to bring Dogen's teachings to lay people. So it has 5 short chapters. It has an introduction, and then it has repenting and eliminating bad karma, receiving precepts and joining the ranks, making the vow to benefit beings, and practicing Buddhism and repaying blessings. So it's talking about things like giving and cooperating and beneficial action and all those good things that we want to be doing, whether we're living in a temple or not, right? It's also got some underlying themes about shikantaza and sokushinzei butsu in everyday life, because remember, this is a text aimed at lay people, right? So how do we take those important key Soto Shu doctrines and make them accessible and moment by moment and things that we can live and practice with kind of all the time? So I think this is not a well-known text in North America because we tend to go straight to the Shobo Genzo. We're not going to a sort of a compilation of themes from the Shobo Genzo. We go straight to the Shobo Genzo, right? Which I think in Japan is not what many lay people would do. Not good or bad, not just different. I think we've kind of bypassed the Shushogi because that's not the way practice has been promoted or shared, right, in this country. However, it's been translated. You can find it. I encourage you to read it. There's also a Baika song about the Shishogi. There's a verse for each of the four main themes. I've done it. So you can investigate Shishogi. There are two additional sort of representative books, is the way they're termed, that everyone would say we should probably know something about. One, of course, is the Shobogenzo, Treasury of the True Dharma Eye. This is Dogen's major work, which exists in multiple editions with different numbers of fascicles. So these are teachings that he gave between August 1231 and January 1253. So this covers a big chunk of his life. Up until he died, he was still working on Shobogenzo. So the main point, or the eye, of the true Dharma that was inherited by the successive ancestors following Shakyamuni. So remember, Dogen didn't think he was out to create a new sect. He thought he was simply transmitting Buddha's true teachings as they had come down through his lineage to him. So people spend their whole lives and careers studying the Shobogenzo. Todo-san often, when he's doing a Genzo-ei or he's doing a series of lectures, he's talked about his own translations of the Shobogenzo. It is not an easy text to sit down and read. I encourage you, if you're reading it, to find a commentary or to listen to Todo-san's lectures on these things, because they need to be unpacked. If we take that Shobogenzo out of its context in medieval Japanese Buddhism and history, there are things we can't understand easily. So if you read it and it feels opaque to you, that's not because you're not bright. It's because it's a difficult text for us and we need help, right, to understand it. The other important representative book is the Denkoroku, and I think we've talked about that here when we talked about transmission, so transmission of the lamp, right? Denkoroku is Keizan's teachings to his monks, to his students, at Daijoji beginning January 1300. So this one comes after Dogen, right? Dogen lived from 1200 to 1253. This is Keizan's teachings from 1300 on. He is tracing the history of the first 53 ancestors. So he's starting in India, he's moving through China, he's moving into Japan, up until himself, because he can't, of course, go any farther than that, right? So he's telling how the Dharma was correctly transmitted. Again, we have this theme about authentic, correct transmission of the Dharma. He's saying, here's how the first 53 ancestors woke up. So for each of this, so he's got a chapter for each of these ancestors. There's a biography. This is an interesting way, by the way, to learn about our lineage, because there's a biography for each of these 53. There's a primary theme about their awakening. We hear the conditions, the story for how they experienced awakening. What brought that about. We have some commentary from Keizan. He's telling us how to practice with this in some cases, and a concluding verse. So it's a fairly comprehensive look at each of these 53 ancestors. Yes, please.
There's the Chinese transmission of the land. Is this something different than that, or is this his version of it?
There is an earlier Chinese version, and this is his version with his commentary. So he was using this to teach his own students. And what we have is his version, his take. Yeah. There are certainly accounts of awakening before this, right? But this is sort of the version coming from Keizan as one of our two ancestors, of course. That's the one that we've latched onto. Yeah. Okay. So those two texts, Shobogenzo, Denkoroku, worth studying. Those do exist in English. We can find them, we can study them. Yeah. From a Dharma study point of view, and North Americans tend to like to do Dharma study because we like to use our intellect, there are 6 more texts that we probably need to be familiar with on your handout: Lankavatara Sutra, Vimalakirti Sutra, Diamond Sutra, Hanya Shingyo, Prajnaparamita literature, Avatamsaka Sutra, or the Flower Garland, and the Lotus Sutra. Lotus Sutra was particularly important to Dogen, so it's good to have some familiarity with those. On your handout, I think I've given you a one-line summary about each of those. So you kind of know, oh, you heard something somewhere, a story from something, which one was that probably in, right? So all of those are worth spending time with. Lotus Sutra, we have a lot of stories and parables that we hear, particularly from Dogen, that we can trace back to that. Avatamsaka is the same way. You may know that I'm working on a long-term series for Dogen Institute. There's a column every month called, I Vow with All Beings or something. I've taken all the little verses. There's 140 verses in the Avatamsaka Sutra. Talk about one every month. So there's things in there that are good to just be aware of and be familiar with. So in general, for us as Buddhists, of course, everything starts with the teachings of the Buddha. So sutras are important because they've collected, recorded what was Buddha saying to his students at the time. It's a sort of a collection of his sermons or teachings, if you will. So we know nothing was written down in Shakyamuni's lifetime. This was not the way things were transmitted. This was all committed to memory. And it wasn't written down until about 100 years after he died. So after he dies, some of his disciples get together. They're concerned that they're actually wandering away from or forgetting some things that Buddha taught. So they want to get everyone together and go, what did Buddha actually say? And then write that down so that there is sort of a agreed to official record of what he was teaching. So they held a council to collect and organize and come up with a standard set. And there's stories about the council, which you can read history about that. 3 disciples were particularly important in that effort. One was Mahakashyapa, who sort of led the charge overall. We have Ananda. Ananda was an attendant to the Buddha, and he had the best memory. So he listened to everything Buddha said and remembered it and was able to sort of parrot that back. The third one is Upali. Upali was the expert on the precepts. So that's how we know some things about the precepts. So everybody compared what they knew or what they had heard. They come to agreement. Now we have something we call today the Pali Canon. So we have an agreed upon set of teachings. Now you will know if you dig into sutras at all, there are sometimes multiple versions. Parinirvana Sutra has, I don't know, a Chinese version, a Sanskrit version, a Japanese version, right? So you need to, again, look at the source of what you're looking at. There are multiple versions of these things somehow that have developed and changed over time. So in addition to sutras and precepts, there were shastras, or studies, commentaries on some of these texts, on these 2 kinds of texts, kind of makes up the third basket of something we call the Tripitaka, or the 3 baskets of texts. So more texts keep getting added, created over time. Now we have this thing we call the Buddhist canon, right? So there isn't one book. Unlike Western religious traditions, we can't go to one book and go, here it is. There's a huge collection of texts over time. So as we will see shortly, Dharma study is one of the 4 main activities as part of our practice vision here at Sanshin. So probably you've encountered the argument that, well, Zen is beyond words and letters. Why do we have all of these texts? That can't be okay. Dharma study, that's useless. It's all about Zazen. It's all about practice with the body, right? So, is the Dharma beyond words and letters? Absolutely. Do we understand what that means and live from that place? Absolutely not. We need something that points us toward what Buddha's experience was and what we need to know. So we need to use words to go beyond words is one way to think of that, right? Provisionally, we need to use words, but we need to not cling to the texts. We need to be able to let go. So we know at Sanshin we have a long, proud history here of writing books, reading books, translating, because of who our founder is. So, that's good enough for me. I think it will always probably be Dharma study here. So, it's useful, I think, to read writing by, or to hear talk by somebody who is a little, farther along the path than we are, to point us in the direction of something, to give us a chance to get into the experience or the mind place of somebody who has seen a little more than we've seen, right? So reading text, studying text, reading books has its place. I think it's useful. We need to, though, approach any kind of text or even a Dharma talk with an open mind and some flexibility, because we might read things that make us uncomfortable, things we don't agree with. Oh, that seems superstitious. Oh, that seems like something supernatural. Oh, that doesn't apply to my life in 21st century North America. Okay, we certainly need to bring some critical thinking to our study, and also it's useful to look at our reactions and go, I'm really uncomfortable with that. What's going on there? Because that says something about our own perceptions, right, where we may be stuck. We certainly don't need to accept everything lock, stock, and barrel. I mean, we know Toto-san says when it comes to reincarnation, well, I don't really believe in that. But he also knows that there's something useful in that we can learn from, right? So, open mind is good. Critical thinking is also good. Sometimes we encounter something and we think, well, if that teaching was true, gee, I'd have to change what I think this self is. Not easy, right? So text can crack something for us, right? It can be a helpful part of our practice. We just need to be free from fixed views because these things can point out where we're stuck. They can also be a bit inspiring. If you're reading writing by somebody who's been practicing for a long time, it can kind of make you go, wow, there's something to this. Like, here's somebody that really sees something, and I'd like to see the way that person sees. I'd like to kind of move through the world and experience the world in the way that that person does, right? Now, nobody can practice for us. Simply reading that text is not going to give us anything we don't have. And yet, right, there's something there that, yeah, it's like that person is living in a way that inspires me to live in a certain way, right? So all of those things can kind of open doors from us. It can encourage us to do the same thing, get to the same place. So study is one of the ways we traditionally cultivate wisdom, and we know wisdom is important in this tradition. So we're moving from seeing and hearing, right, reading a book, hearing somebody speak, to thinking, reflecting, considering, embodying. We can see some maturity of practice. Is it linear? No, and yet we can see some maturing of practice that can happen. So fortunately, here we have a lot of opportunities to engage in discussion, to read things together, to listen to Toto-san, to listen to recordings. So, because we know pretty much impossible to read many of these things by ourselves and completely understand. Are there things quickly that people want to ask about sutras, texts, written stuff? I've given you a list. It's a lot. I know it's a lot. It's a lifelong study. And I'm not saying you couldn't or shouldn't read things that are not on this list. These are the things you're going to hear about in this tradition referred to over and over and over and over again.